really struggling today filming. Let's lock in. Hello everybody, my name is Lily. Welcome to my channel. Today I'll be giving you my 2025 knitting wrapped. Let's get into it. Starting off, I have my Sophie hood. This is my Sophie hood, which I started knitting on the 3rd of January, 2025. I finished it on January 13th, 2025. So it took me about a week and a half. It was my first project other than this step-by-step sweater that I have been knit in years. I learned to knit back in 1st grade, and since then I have really not been knitting much. 2024 was kind of my first time picking back up those needles, and I started very strong with my step-by-step sweater. The step-by-step sweater, I had a great time knitting. I would love to make another one if I get enough yarn at some point in a sweater quantity. Not that I need more yarn. I have way too much yarn right now, just in tiny quantities, because when I started my knitting journey again back in 2024, I just kept buying like one skein of things, being like, this is so cute, and then not realizing that I can't actually really make a big garment out of it. Where was I? Yes. Don't know. I would rate the Sophie hood, my Sophie hood personally, maybe a 5 or 6 out of 10. Overall, the pattern was okay. I had seen a lot of TikToks talking about how the Sophie hood pattern is super beginner friendly. It's a very good, easy pattern to teach you about how to essentially just read patterns and get more familiar. And while I do think that is true, I would also say that it's a little confusing for people who are beginners. I watched the step-by-step sweater video tutorial rather than following a written pattern, which I think kind of helped me a lot. I tried to knit the Sophie hood once before. If I can find a picture, I'll throw it up there. I tried to knit it before in red, and if you can see in the picture, it was tiny. The reason it was so tiny was definitely just user error. It was because I didn't realize it said that you had to repeat the increases every few rows rather than just reading the pattern. I don't think I even, the little parentheses where it's like, repeat this every blank amount of rows. I think it didn't say it like word for word like that, and I just skipped it. Kind of. I'm not sure. I don't know what happened. It didn't work. This one still, it works, but it's definitely not even at the bottom. The widths of these are just they're not the same, and that's okay. What I wanted to mention at the beginning of this video, but wasn't sure how to really put it in, was because 2025 was kind of my first full year of getting back into knitting, you'll see throughout my projects like the progression of me getting better and learning more about knitting. And I think it's super fun, and I'm going to be pointing out all those differences. This is the hood on. One thing I would say, and another reason I would rate it a kind of lower score than how many people would do it, is like, I knit a medium. And yes, I did knit it incorrectly. Yeah, a medium is still a little small. When you change the size, it doesn't change the depth of the hood. It only changes the length of these little arms. If you have a big dome like me, or you're trying to fit a claw clip back there, I would highly recommend trying to modify the pattern. That is something that I have no idea how to do. So props to you if you know how to do it, and you should teach me. I would highly recommend trying to modify the hood deeper, because it's always fallen off my head. But I also think that I may have a larger head than the average person. Another reason why I rated the Sophie hood a little bit lower was I just found it so long and repetitive. I thought that while it was kind of an easier knit, it is garter. Garter stitch is also kind of a bit less forgiving than stockinette, in my opinion, when having to fix mistakes. So that was another reason why I ranked it 5 out of 10. My second completed knit of the year, or my Year of the Snake socks by Marie Elise Duggal. They are knitted up in fine merino by Nice Supreme Yarns in the colorway Mighty Mouse. I overall would rate this experience knitting these to be like an 8 or 9 out of 10. They were my first ever sock knit, and also my first ever cable knit, and they taught me so much about the construction of socks, and they also taught me about how to do cable knits overall. I started this knit January 29th, and I completed these socks on February 9th, so kind of a pretty fast knit. I was not gotten by the second sockers? Girl, why do I never see... I feel like I can't even call myself a knitter because I don't even remember any of the cool jargon that they use. But I completed 2 socks easy peasy because I wanted to wear them and I think they're so cute. And the one reason that they are not in 10 out of 10 is because the yarn I use a little bit uncomfortable when I walk around a lot in them, but these are great lounging socks and I think that it was overall a great experience and taught me a lot about how to just knit socks and cables. For these socks, I used my CHAOGOO interchangeable lace set needles, and I just did the magic loop. I never remember what it's called. I really enjoyed them. I thought the magic loop at the time was fun and easy, and that has been kind of had been my go-to. And you'll notice I'm using past tense because later in the year, I have become a DPN girly. The third knit I completed of 2025 is my twist loop tank, which is by Other Loops. The yarn that I used is the Wandering Flock Cotton Lino. I started this project February 15th and finished it March 9th, so it was a bit of a longer project. Overall, I would rate this to be, unfortunately, just a 6 out of 10. I think my overall product was not how I expected it to be. As somebody who was kind of reintroducing herself back into knitting, I was not very familiar with how to modify patterns, nor choose the proper yarn for patterns, or just kind of be like, oh wow, this would be a really issue. Essentially what I'm trying to say is these armholes are just the deepest things you ever done seen. They just really expose you, and if you see how I'm holding this up now, the shirt and the drape and the weight of the yarn really makes it drape down and not out to cover you. So I've been really struggling to style this properly. I will insert a picture here of me wearing it. I had a blue tank under it. I also posted a TikTok, which maybe I'll put in here as I'm talking, where a lot of people commented, they were like, ooh, don't style it like that. That's not good. And I was like, all right, well, how do I style it? This yarn, though, is gorgeous. Like I mentioned, it is the Wandering Flock Cotton Lino. It was expansive. It is very soft to the touch, which confuses me because I remember when I was wearing it in the summer, I felt very itchy in it. Very, very itchy. I am thinking that I would like to frog this and turn it into a cardigan. I think that I'm definitely going to require more yarn if I do that, but this color is everything. The fabric it makes is everything, and I would love to make a garment that I would actually enjoy wearing. I have seen a lot of people actually make modifications to make the armholes less deep, as well as widen the front and kind of make it a more fitted fit. And that's kind of what I thought it was going to be. But that's not what happened. I think mostly my biggest downfall was the actual yarn choice. It's so heavy and it's so drapey, which is great, but not for a tank. Unfortunate, but you win some, you lose some, and a lot of people are like, it's so gorgeous, and I know it's so gorgeous, but it just doesn't fit me properly. The next tank top that I completed, or the next knit that I completed, is the boat neck tank, which is a pattern by Madison McCollum. I used the yarn Arctic Pearl, which is a seesaw yarn, in the colorway 09. I would rate this pattern and my project overall like an 8 out of 10. I docked some points, and that's on me because I don't think this yarn was the correct yarn for this pattern. I really wanted to wear this braless and have it just be a nice staple tank in my wardrobe, but the drape, the gappage, it wasn't right. I also dock a few points because I was silly and not paying attention, and when I joined the two panels together, I actually twisted the top, which I think it could be cute, but you're supposed to have I-cord hems, or whatever they're called, on the armholes, and that is something, first of all, I do not like I-cords. I think that they're very time consuming, and they do look nice, but I'll only be doing them on things that really, really need them. And this probably does really need it because it kind of does curl in. However, I don't really care. I wore this to the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival and really enjoyed it. This was another reason I docked at some points. But again, user error, so not on Madison. I am not a gauge swatcher, and when I follow patterns, I also don't really like putting my my projects on hold or like on like any spare yarn because I'm lazy. And so half the time I will cast things off and they don't fit me, and then I'm like, damn, and then I have to undo the cast off and then I have to redo it. And as somebody again who kind of just reintroduced herself to knitting, that often results in issues. So if you can see, you can kind of see more on this side. I have a lot of issues where I tried to pick back up the stitches. I really didn't know what I was doing. Also, I am so bad at folded over hems. That's probably, again, user error, but damn, they're annoying and I'm bad at them. Getting back into a winter knit, if you could tell, it kind of, the seasons were changing. I started off with a Sophie hood because it was so cold, and then I got my tank tops. Well, Sophie hood socks, then tank tops. Now we're back to a sweater. This is my Olga sweater. I use a vintage DK yarn in the colorway 2104 and 2145, which is just the khaki and the black. I really did not enjoy knitting this in the beginning. I thought that the yarn, again, on me, I don't gauge swatch, I thought that this would look a bit more neat, but I was using the wrong size needles, so my bad. But I didn't want to go back because, again, I'm lazy. And so this is what I ended up with. I think it looks very cute. It definitely looks quite handmade, which is a-okay with me. There are a few errors in the arms where I just forgot to like switch the color or something. I don't know what happened. But oh yeah, see, just completely forgot. But overall, I would rate this knit process maybe like, what did I write down? I wrote down 8 out of 10, I would give this an 8 out of 10. I had a lot of struggles in the beginning. Again, yes, I thought it looked messy, but I got to the armhole part and just got so frustrated. I could not somehow figure out, like, that I could not pick up the right amount of stitches in the arm. In the end, I kind of just picked up stitches randomly. I still think that the armhole is very tight at the top. I actually, like, literally DM'd with one of my friends on TikTok being like, what is happening? The Olga sweater taught me a lot about sweater construction. I had already done, like I mentioned before, my step-by-step sweater, but this was, I don't even know what it's called, but it's not the same construction. It is not a raglan. Maybe it's a drop shoulder. I don't know. I did German short rows in the back, which I know that term, but yeah. The Olga sweater overall, again, I don't ever try on any of my knits, so this could be on me, but I also have read other reviews. It's a little short, so if you want it to not be so short, I would highly recommend not following the pattern and making it a bit longer. We are now getting into the knits that I do not physically have here because 2025, new year, it was a new me, and I was gift knitting away like a kind person who doesn't just hoard all of her knitting things, which actually kudos to the people who don't gift knit. Gift knitting was the most stressful thing I've ever done. I didn't really enjoy it. Actually, I did enjoy most of it. Just, I wish I could keep them. Like, I wish I could have a pair of the things I knit for myself and the person who I gifted it to, you know? But only with, like, less effort, right? Right. The sixth thing I knit this year was a classic ribbed hat by Purl Soho. I used Germantown yarn, which I had actually bought at Kelbourne Woolens myself. I was visiting my friend Sid, who I ended up gift knitting this hat for, and we went and took a little day trip to Kelbourne Woolens. The yarn I chose, I think, is deep teal, and overall this pattern was so super fun and easy to knit up. I would almost rate it a 10 out of 10, except for the fact it's a little bit small. I did choose to knit an adult small, but an adult small, very small. Maybe me and my friends have big heads, my family has big heads, I'm not sure, but it was pretty small. Again, I do not gauge swatch, so that could completely be on me. This is the hat. I really enjoyed it. Again, I knit it up in one day. It was so fast and so easy. Most of my knits, if you can tell, are often things that are using very fine weight yarn. So it's very fun whenever I have a bit of a bulkier yarn to see how fast it knits up. Yeah, overall, really enjoyed this knit and will do it again. And you'll see I did do it again. Moving on to my 7th knit of the year, which were vanilla socks, which are just like I followed the video from the Crazy Sock Lady on YouTube using DPNs, and this is where my DPN journey began. I really love DPNs. Before I get into this, the yarn I used was Miss Babs 2-ply yummy 2-ply yarn in the colorway Separate, I think. That doesn't sound right. I'll put it here when I figure it out. I began my DPN journey because a lot of my abandoned whips are actually using a lot of those interchangeable cables, which I would have needed for my Magic Loop socks. So I was like, I'm not frogging those because maybe one day they'll be done. But I began my DPN journey and had a really great time. I thought that it was a little bit difficult in the beginning. I kept pulling out the wrong DPN, so half the time I would have to re-put the stitches back onto the needle because I kept, instead of like taking out the empty needle from my hand, I would take, I don't know if that makes sense, but I found that difficult in the beginning, and then I did stab myself with the needle. I laid down in bed and just fully impaled myself in the back, and that was okay. A little scary. It did set me back a few days, but since then, I've only been stabbed one more time, and we have been good since then, and that was only like a week ago, so fingers crossed, knock on wood, no more stabbings will occur. I gift knitted these socks to my aunt. She loves them. I'll insert a picture right here. They were super fun, super fast, super easy, except for the fact I did mess up. I completely did mess up because one time when I was pulling the needle out, one time when I was trying to pull out the empty needle, I pulled out one of the needles with all the stitches on them, and then all my stitches got completely turned around, and I ended up doing my decreases in the completely wrong spots, which ended up having me doing my first ever sock surgery, which was so exciting. That made me feel like a real knitter. I completely just chopped into that biddy. I tried to do a lifeline, that didn't work, but then it all worked out, and I was able to get my stitches back on, not twist any of them like I did in my boat neck tank. It worked out perfectly. She didn't even know, and I felt like a very much accomplished knitter. Overall, I would rate the Crazy Sock Ladies DPN/vanilla sock pattern 10 out of 10. It was a great experience for me, and I would highly recommend it to everybody else. My 8th project I completed was another classic ribbed hat by Pearl Soho. This time I used a different Germantown yarn, which I also bought at Kelborn Woollens a different time. And this time I used a black and white striped yarn, which was, again, their Germantown yarn. Again, I would rate it 9 out of 10. Probably user error. I probably should have made it a bigger size if I knew that the small was small. But I did make the first hat a little bit small on purpose because I wanted it to be a hipster beanie. Turned out to be way too small. Second hat still turned out to be a hipster beanie, but was like maybe a little bit more appropriately sized. But yeah, that was my fault. Okay, number 9 is this plushie. It was a knit amigurumi kit from Hardycraft. It was the Little Lamb by Hardycraft, and I overall would rate this experience a 6 out of 10. It's a little bit user error, it's a little bit on Hardycraft, but overall, I did not enjoy doing this. I am not somebody who's good at sewing. And there was just too much sewing. So that was maybe user error. I also think, though, that the pattern itself was written a little bit sloppily, and maybe it was also my fault because I skimmed it. But throughout the pattern, they refer to stockinette stitch as ST, which, stitches are also referred to as ST. So I actually had completely knitted the head and body when I realized, oh, this don't look right. It looks very messy. And then I looked at the picture and I was like, oh, it's supposed to be in stockinette stitch. And once I was going back through the pattern and reading it again, I was like, wow, I actually see exactly why I messed up. And that was because the pattern, referred to the stockinette stitch as ST, which made it a little bit difficult. Maybe I rushed, but I think that referring to stockinette stitch as ST when you're also referring to stitches as ST don't really make sense. One plus for this is that even with me making a head and body completely wrong, I did have enough yarn in the little kit to just make them again. And I had more than enough yarn in the end to complete the very cute little toy that I ended up gifting to this baby who really enjoyed it, but I don't think it's for me. I don't think it's for me. Moving on, I wanted to quickly talk about my abandoned whips because those were also a big part of 2025. I had tried to make two 9 p.m. tanks in 2025, but was stymied both times when I realized I do not have enough yarn for it. I also was stymied when I had to do this roll folded over hem and it looked messy and pissed me off and just looked terrible. So yeah. Also, I realized I don't think I even want this like to be a tank top really. I think it would be a much cuter something else. So if you guys have any ideas about what to make this, I would love some ideas. I'm definitely going to frog this and it deserves to be used. The yarn is 29 Bridges Studios in the colorway Patina, and it's just such a cute color, and it deserves to be made into something that I'll wear and love. My other abandoned whip, which I am not going to pull out right now, but I'll overlay a video here, is my Azalea cardigan. It was one of the most fun knits I have done, but also frustrating. I, for some reason, thought that the panels were not lining up properly, which I think they are actually lining up now that I look at it. But I had started and stopped that project multiple times. That actually is my number one thing on my queue after I finish my current whip, which I will show you after. My Azalea cardigan uses Malabrigos Rios yarn, and I would love to finish it by this year's Lunar New Year, because it's a beautiful bright red that I think would look great for Lunar New Year. It is short sleeve, so it might be a little cold, but I could wear a long sleeve under it, I guess. That's all for the abandoned whips and the completed things. My current whip right now is a Alma glove by this person right here. I actually had made one prior, but if you can't tell, it is tiny. Again, like I've mentioned quite a few times, do not gauge swatch, and that is the result of not gauge swatching. I could have probably ripped this out, but something that I really don't enjoy is like frogging multiple strand color work because the yarn just gets so tangled. Even though like I'm catching my floats and I'm doing all these things, like no, it just don't work out, but that's okay. I think that this glove is going to fit. Hopefully, it's still a little small, and that is my fault again because I did not use the right needle size because I thought that with the 3 millimeters, it would just be too big, but it might be too small again a little bit, but that's okay. It kind of looks like it's gonna fit, and I think it looks so cute. This is my first ever real color work. I took a class back in the spring at Maryland Sheep and Wool about color work, and it inspired me, but I finally got to it, and it's so cute. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you guys have any suggestions on what I could frog my 29 Bridges Studios Petunia shirt into, please let me know. I would really love to make something cute and something that I would wear. I will put the actual like measurements here if I can find them, so you guys can recommend me appropriate things. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.